for having me. And thanks for joining the session and the talk. So yes, Jay Stoltzenberg, thanks for the introduction. Just a word about Airbus. So you probably know us from the aircraft you fly and that we manufacture. There's about, I think, 14,000 Airbus aircraft operational every day, flying, taking off every 2 seconds. So that's what we're most known for. We also have larger divisions in defense and space. For example, the Eurofighter, you may know, as well as large satellite programs. We are also the largest helicopter manufacturer in the world. So that's broad divisions. We try to be quite coordinated on the AI front. And yes, something that's really keen and sort of important to us is not just sort of the compliance or the minimal approach to AI, but really how do we merge a take on AI with our company values and a responsible approach company-wide. So happy to share with you about that. Starting with an overall picture of where AI is relevant, where do we employ it, some examples of use cases, maybe focus on Gen AI. I'll show you a bit on the regulation challenges we have in different areas of the company and how that leads us to really think very closely around regulation, but also sort of what is our way, how do we responsibly handle the technology. Oh, sorry, can I go back? That's that one, right? Yeah. Okay, so first off, the different application fields, the value streams, where do we apply AI? On the one side, it's improving sort of the daily business. This can be, as part of your workspace tooling that is quite important just to have that available to you in terms of generative AI features. It will also come through features coming through applications we all use. But something we see quite a bit is especially around generative AI, just the sort of daily tasks of finding information. So, we have very technical language, we have tons of documentation, processes, references. So, a lot of jobs in Airbus in engineering or customer support that really rely on finding information at the right point in time that's relevant and taking a lot of time out of their jobs. So here, things like Gen AI are really, really interesting. In terms of operation support, so also when I look at sort of traditional AI maybe, machine learning, computer vision, optimization, there's a lot of fields here where they support our core operations, help us bring more efficiency to processes, be better at planning, at forecasting, understanding patterns, and so on. So this is really important. Also, when you think further on, sort of there's the operational improvements, but there's also sort of game-changing AI applications when I look at how engineering design is done. So things like surrogate modeling have really big potential already utilized in the design processes. If you look at, for example, how we design an aircraft, that's a very, very heavy process, and we're sort of just preparing to launch a new aircraft program, meaning we'll design the whole aircraft platform again from scratch. So having end-to-end AI type capabilities, data continuity, and means to create true digital twins is going to be a true game changer in, for example, the whole design of an aircraft. We have customer efficiency, so this is supporting our customers with a flying product. So things like predictive maintenance, really having that understanding of the aircraft's operation in the fleet. You can imagine it's quite different if you're operating an aircraft in the desert versus in northern Alaska. So AI can help really give customized services and really improve the customer experience. But it can also be implemented in the products themselves, so the aircraft, the helicopters, and so on, where that's when you look towards autonomy of flight, single pilot operations, augmentation of pilots, and improving safety of the aircraft themselves. So that's a longer sort of research, but is very actively looked at, I can tell you as well. And some examples from the different divisions here. So on the left side, you see satellite imagery analytics services from defense and space. So we operate our own satellite fleets and have satellite imagery analysis widely available since quite a long time. This can be, for example, object detection of assets for intelligence purposes, but also for sort of, climate monitoring, climate services, analysis of natural catastrophes, or insurance services even. On the products themselves, for the aircraft in the middle, you see essentially one of our A350 of our own test aircraft that utilizes AI features with computer vision, for example, to help with automated landing, automated taxiing, basically augmenting as well the pilot. We're testing single pilot operations and to increase the safety of aircraft if the pilot is incapacitated. Can the aircraft still land? Can AI support a pilot in very stressful situations? So these are things that are being researched that will take a longer time. And similar on a helicopter, we have our test fleet helicopters equipped here as well. We call this the Pioneer Lab, where it also supports, I believe, a 360 sort of view with object detection and sort of scene understanding. Yeah. And of course, in the process in the company itself, so many areas that are like really interesting is on the shop floor itself. Very complex operations that require a lot of information. You have to be very careful to do the right steps at the right time. A lot of validation there. But here as well, I mean, workers already utilize AI capabilities a lot when it comes to sort of prioritizing the right, outstanding work to make sure you don't disturb the production, to and analyze quality occurrences across the 10 different final assembly lines we have for aircraft. So that's already working quite a bit. AI, for example, in combination with robotics. Aviation is still a very manual labor in most of the cases. When robots come into play, it's usually not sort of a serial production with thousands of aircraft a day. It's more sort of human machine augmentation where the robot needs to understand where it is, really needs to understand its context. And on the right side is the engineering, what I mentioned, the sort of, the digital twin, the whole design process. That's a really large field as well. And a bit of a focus on some of the challenges that lead to where I'm going to end. If you look at those processes I showed before, you can imagine there's quite different areas of sensitivity. Some of the processes we have are under regulation, so of course the quality inspection of an aircraft is very related to safety and airworthiness. So not just do we have AI Act to care about, but we also have the EASA, which is the European Aviation sort of Safety Administration, that regulates the process that we have. So they also have a say, and if we basically augment our quality process with AI, they also are part of the regulation and sort of validating how we change the process and use the processes. So that can be quite different than when you're in like a support function and just supporting an administrative task. One area we see, what I mentioned at the beginning, is with Gen AI. That's really interesting, where we see a lot of value in the short term all across the company is utilizing Gen AI for sort of types of chatbots that understand your data scope, your reference documentation quite well, and can just help you and find information really well. We do a lot of prototyping across the company in many different fields and processes, and find that that is something that brings a lot of value across all of the functions. Just to name a few examples, that can include, for example, for procurement or legal, analyzing contracts, authoring contracts, identifying, for example, liability and legacy contracts. Quite a complex task for a huge legacy amount of contracts you have. Engineering support, answering technical customer inquiries. So this can be from, well, we have an app, for example, where the active fleet, the airlines themselves, raise technical questions to us, and we have hundreds of engineers on our side analyzing and making sure they give the right answers. That can be referencing to manuals, that can be analyzing from previous requests that has been asked before. So they take quite a long time to analyze these topics. We see that with Gen AI, they can very easily find similar questions from before, directly find the reference to the right manual, and really speed up that whole process. So it's quite promising overall. And just a word on our approach of that is as well, because like I'm from the central team for AI. We have a lot of technical experts. We run like the key projects. But it's such a large company, you have to democratize and federate the organization and allow for this experimentation to happen across the company in a compliant way. So we as the Center of Excellence really try to give access to cloud-ready platforms that are ready pretty much in the architectural environment you would put things into production, but the really sort of secured sandbox spaces that we can open to any business team that's technically well versed. We have a large population of very well technically versed people who've upskilled themselves in coding, analytics, AI, and so on. So that's been a huge enabler, but it raises all these questions. So right, if I even increase the exploration all across the company, you want to make sure you do that in the right way. And with AI Act, of course, you need to be aware of all initiatives running, have everything registered, do the right risk classification. And so I think it's really an opportunity to think of how do you allow early exploration in a compliant, sort of safe way, and that over time, the governance that you also impose sort of really strengthens. So when you put things into production, you do it very meticulously, very well. No? So these are the questions that really raise, and I think you as a central team, you really have to find answers to that. One word is also sort of the whole culture around that. So from building a kind of open source culture within the confines of an organization is quite enabling here as well. But yeah, so you still have to ensure that basically all these imposing aspects of regulation, aligning that with your company values is all in line and is still happening. And you do it with the right spirit. Of course, there's a lot of fear in all areas of the company around what will AI take my job away? Do I trust my employer to handle that responsibly? So there's a lot of these questions coming in, and we think it's quite important to address this the right way. Just to give you an idea on how this works with AI Act, I mentioned it a bit before already. So AI Act overall encompasses, of course, AI type use cases. And for the sectorial regulations, anything that is under regulated processes on the aircraft itself will have the EASA regulation as well. So quite interesting to see how this will play out in terms of like how do we manage regulatory sandboxes. Will this come from EASA or the German governments, the national governments? How will that be supported? So something we also appreciate, I think the exchange with Bitkom and the peers here quite a bit to see the right approach, the right guidance. Yes, and on the outlook, when it comes to human-centric approach, so EASA's vision as well aligns with that quite nicely with us. So when they lay out how this will work, they basically see it as different levels of augmentation, with the level 1 being assistance to the human. So this is basically human using AI assistance, but still in full control of the workflow. Level 2, sort of human-machine pairing, where it's like a coordination, and the human can still basically has control over the decisions. And level 3 is when the systems already kind of autonomously start to make decisions, take actions, but are still overridden by the human. There will possibly be a level 4 for like sort of full autonomy. But as you can see, EASA is taking a very sort of human-centric approach to this. And we feel like this is well aligned with our company culture as well. We really value the human-centric approach. We value highly the human expertise in everything we do. So we align with that quite well. To give you an idea on how this looks like in aviation, thinking about all these processes under sort of production and on the aircraft, we're looking around, it's a bit hard to see here, but level 1, sort of the first use cases will be validated by EASA probably next year. The level 2 guidance, the guidance itself is already available, and we expect first use cases to be deployed 2035, and then 2050 plus is like the later almost autonomy. So far away from the aircraft itself, but you can see basically if we think around developing the new aircraft program, this will really come into question if we will see this. But even if it's not autonomy, it's really also making the aircraft and the whole system safer. So when we really think about how we go about all that responsible aspects and the regulation, when you see it and bring it sort of outward, the furthest is you're trying to whatever is feasible, you approach. If it's technically possible, the next question is it sustainable? Does this make sense in the long term? Is it acceptable in the sense of compliance? So do we fulfill all the rules to deploy a system? But then we really want to focus on the preferable. So essentially allowing innovation, making use of innovation, but doing things the right way that we believe are in line with our values, with European core values, with the company overall. We don't think that this necessarily has to mean that this slows you down in terms of innovation, but it's really more a ways of aligning things with your corporate culture and making sure that making sure that you take these concerns early on and are basically developing even safer systems because you anticipate much better. So what we try to approach is that what we call it towards ethics by design. So this can be as simple as very early on in your project, basically, giving room to understand who are your stakeholders, who are your actual customers and users of the system, and just asking them about their concerns. And basically just making sure that you have principles, ethical values that you adhere to, and you make that, voicing of concern part of the conversation and include that in your risk management. We believe it basically fosters trust with the employees, with the teams that you try to assist with AI. We believe it creates innovation and value. You still focus on valuable use cases, and it contributes to risk reduction because you're much more anticipative of basically in a structured way, being able to voice concerns structurally as well as sort of just by giving the space. So what we've done is we've been aligning what we call these AI principles. It's really, coming from the core of European values, but also from our company values that really merge. And this is something we've agreed and aligned on as sort of a culture to implement AI across the whole group. It starts with safety first. So that's at the heart of everything we do. We look at systems from the safety perspective, especially in these sort of production-related areas I've talked about. While being in sustainability, we implement AI for societal good, for the good of our employees as well, in a sustainable manner. The systems that we build, that we integrate, we ensure that we take accountability for them, and we ensure transparency for them. Privacy, data protection, of course, always an important point. Fairness, monitoring for bias, fairness, equality is always a core thing, and what I mentioned, the human agency and oversight in any system that we build. We value the human-centric expertise and build systems around the employee and the human. To give an idea what this looks like in this sort of innovation cycle and this federated network of teams implementing AI, it can be as simple as having like a lab stage, an early stage, where you have a sort of preliminary ethics assessment along with the qualification of a use case. This area where you raise concerns, you may have sort of a checklist that you would later on bring in as well, just to make sure that you're having good intent with your system, that stakeholders and users of the system are well heard, but that still is lightweight. So ideally, if you have like a low risk use case that doesn't raise any concerns, you can still sort of smooth sail through the first phase, and there's really not much of sort of heavy governance that you'd be approaching. If of course you're really going in a system that's sort of in ethical challenging territory, you would have these kind of questions pop up early on and even avoid such a use case being addressed, or be very diligent and go through like an expert board of really looking in detail around the challenges you want to be very much aware about. And anything that gets deployed goes through that sort of meticulous process for like a real ethical assessment. That sounds very fluff, but how can you actually translate that into sort of credible sort of technical aspects and sort of associated mitigation measures and strategies? Just to take you a few examples, so what I've listed on the left side are like our principles around this, and they can lead to identifying specific harms, that can lead to basically identifying the associated security threats and defining technical mitigation measures. So this can be things like implementing guardrails, bias checks and outputs, safety filters and output filtering. So we believe that basically by approaching projects like this in sort of an adaptive governance is a good way to build safe and reliable AI systems. So in terms of key takeaways, so we're all very much interested in looking forward to the interplay and the regulation coming from the AI office, but also from regulation authorities. Democratizing an AI for us basically is a scaling and wide innovation, but adaptive governance is really important. And AI principles, I would recommend everybody to sort of identify their corporate culture, blend that with the values important to you, and make that sort of the mindset in your company. And for us, ethics is not a steering, it doesn't have to be a brake, but it's actually a steering wheel in your AI approaches. Thank you.